You know when you're about to take a solo after you spent so much time drilling those scales and running those exercises, getting yourself hyped up and ready to go, then when it comes time for you to go straight into it and just let it rip, you kind of go blank. Believe it or not, I know that feeling all too well. Don't you just wish that your solos would just come out effortlessly through your fingers, like when we see all of our favorite guitar players playing and they make it look so easy? Well, today I'm going to share with you what I've learned over years of observation and trial and error to make solos really come out naturally. And the beauty of this method is you can start doing this right now without having to spend some time improving your technique. Because this is a method that applies to any skill level, because soloing is soloing, whether you're playing a handful of notes or a whole bunch of notes. Because at the end of the day, solos are about melody, right? We're always hearing about playing melodic solos. And a melody can be extremely simple. It can just be a couple of notes just done in a rhythmic way that maybe has a little bit of expressive ways of playing the notes. Because remember, it's not just what you play, it's how you play it, right? But it's making those couple of notes sound memorable and great and musical. And this is great because oftentimes when we think about soloing, it generally comes with a lot of baggage, right? We got to know a whole lot of scales, a whole lot of solos and licks and all that kind of stuff beforehand, when the truth is you can tap into your inner musician on a very, very simple basis and actually make music. I'm talking real, valid, listenable music. So let's get right to it. Here is the thing that's going to make your solos come to you more naturally and effortlessly. It all starts with a timeline, and the timeline begins with up here. So at the very beginning, what needs to happen is you need to craft a melody in your head first. Now, do you have to be a songwriting whiz in order to do that? Absolutely not. Like I said, the melodies can be really simple. They don't even have to be that serious. You can just kind of like vaguely sing something to yourself and just have that to work with to come up with something that your fingers bring out on your guitar. Which brings me to the last part of the timeline. It's really just two steps, right? It's you write a melody in your head and then you play it. That's the timeline. It's got to be in that order of events. And in the beginning, it'll be a slow process, right? You'll start by writing a melody, even if it's real simple, you'll come up with it, and then you'll have to figure out how to play it. That's why the simpler the melody is, the easier it's going to be to start. But taking, for example, the key of E minor, like what I was playing in at the beginning, I was just using E diatonic with some E minor pentatonic thrown in. Right, so that was just kind of my playground. I wasn't even using the scales in their entirety. I was just using a few notes, really. But that's lending to my point that you don't need a whole lot of notes to create a melody. So that very first melody, I think it was this. How simple is that, right? Now that's something you could easily write in your head. And here's the thing, even if I didn't come up with that exact melody in my head, if I just had something that jogged the creative process and then forced my fingers now to actually try to play and manifest that melody. It never has to be perfect. Over time, you're going to be able to play exactly what you hear in your head. But in the beginning, it may be a little clunky, and that's okay. So if let's say you come up with something a little more vague, like something like that, right? Just this kind of almost throwaway sounding thing, like okay, let me turn that into an actual interesting lick. That sounds nice, or like a... Also nice, staying within E minor pentatonic here. I mean, I just created two licks just from that real-time, off-the-cuff example that I just gave you. So just keep it in mind that even if you can't perfectly play what you hear in your head right now, even getting an approximation of that is something, right? It's something that came from nothing. You otherwise would not have come up with that melody had you not started by coming up with something right here. So I'm going to throw on that backing track again, and then I'm going to walk through exactly my thought process as I'm coming up with these really simple melodies, just staying within the confines of the E minor scale or the E minor pentatonic scale, and just seeing what we come up with. So just going to add some extra notes into my phrases. All right, So I was getting a little bit busier there with the notes. The phrases were denser, had more notes going on, right? It went from like 2 to 3 notes to like 5 to 6 maybe. So just to show you how this can kind of gradually lead up to this process of being able to handle longer phrases, maybe more complicated licks if you want to call it that. But you got to start simple, and over time you're going to be able to play exactly what you hear in your head. Just start really, really simple, painfully simple, and then work your way up from there. Because if we're being honest with ourselves, if we were to just roll a backing track and then just vocalize lines, we could do that all day long. That doesn't require any additional skill. Now, we may not be super thrilled about the ideas we come up with because maybe we don't feel inspired, and that's fine, right? But that's why I said they don't have to be perfect, the melodies. Just let it give you something to work with, right? Something that you wouldn't otherwise have had. So if you're coming up with these really simple ideas, then over time, they're becoming a little less simple because you're adding in more notes. You're gradually getting better and more competent at coming up with these licks. And then just think about the continuous growth from there. You're going to get to a point where you're like, do what a lot of these jazz cats are doing, where they're just in real time scatting along with what they're playing, even though it's like really, really fast, like all that crazy stuff, right? It starts somewhere. And then this is our starting point. And by the way, if you're getting value out of this lesson, do me a favor, hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. It'll really help us out, and it'll put you first in line for all the new lessons we got coming your way. So imagine after a few weeks or months of trying this method out, right, where you could start coming up with ideas on the fly using this real simple method, this timeline of coming up with the melody and then playing it. So you start real simple, gradually increase in your complexity, and then you get to a point where you're like, I can kind of do some pretty cool continuous phrasing with this, even just using one scale. Let's take a look at what that might look like. Should be interesting. All right, you get the idea. So I was being real sporadic and stuff, but you got to think in terms of phrasing, right? So every little line you come up with it, you play it, and then you got that little breathing room, that little space between the next phrase, which is very important in music, right? You don't just want to be energized or bunnying the whole thing where you're just like going nonstop, and that can end up leading to overplaying sometimes. You want to be able to just state what you want to state, and we can use our own brains to help us come up with a phrase that feels natural and then just kind of flows, as opposed to just cranking out something that doesn't stop. Our brains are going to help us regulate our timing and then, just make sure that we're actually speaking in terms of phrases when we're creating these licks. So that was all just to demonstrate this method to you, this timeline method, right, of creating the melody and then playing it. Start stupid simple and then gradually work your way up in complexity, starting from a couple notes, a handful of notes, and then adding some more notes. You can think of it like graduating to using more notes. And then as you get better and more fluid with that, you're using even more notes. And you can have these great long phrases and even these cool licks that are pretty dense with notes that are actually completely composed by ear, as opposed to your fingers just being on this sort of automatic autopilot that doesn't really bring you anything musical. It's just more of a mechanical going through the motions kind of thing. So I invite you to start using this method right now. Start really, really, really simple. You can do that, right? And I'm telling you, when you keep at it and you start adding more notes into the mix, once you get comfortable, you're going to impress yourself with the ideas that you're coming up with. And speaking of impressing yourself, what if I told you that there's a way to incorporate this method in any key with just a little bit of extra help? And when I say any key, I mean any key in music. So if you're just someone who knows how to play in the key of A or in the key of E, now you'll be able to play it over all the keys by using what I'm about to give you. It's the perfect follow-up lesson with what we just covered today. And here it is. This is a comprehensive guide on how to instantly solo in any key. The first thing you're going to learn in just a matter of minutes is how to find every key on the fretboard. And then you're going to learn some building blocks on how to solo in those keys. It's going to be the perfect playground for you to practice this method that we just went over today. And by the way, this lesson is 100% yours, 100% free. You heard me right. All you got to do is click here to claim your copy or check the link I left in the description box. Playing guitar solos can be such a fun and rewarding experience. You can think of playing a solo as almost like writing a song within a song. And just like you can write a great song with a couple chords, you can play a great solo with a couple notes.